Thank you. So, being 9:01 a.m. On the 17th of September, I declare the Council meeting, ordinary meeting, open. Pursuant to Section 13 of Council's Local Law Number 2, I'm inviting the Interim Management Committee meeting members being Jan Taylor, Simone Webb, Steve Greenwood, Rob Jones, Stan Gallo and Steve Greenwood. Got you twice, Steve. You can talk us twice as much as the others, to address the Council on any matters before it. I'm also bound to declare conflicts of interest and any potential conflicts of interest. The members of the Interim Management Committee are not legally bound to do so. However, in accordance with the Interim Management Charter, they will also declare conflicts of interest and potential conflicts of interest. Ipswich City Council respectfully acknowledges the traditional owners as custodians on the land upon which we meet. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, as the keepers of the traditions, cultures and stories of a proud people. I would ask you all please to stand for the reading of the prayer. Let us in silence pray or reflect upon our responsibilities to the people of Ipswich. We meet today to serve our community, to use our resources wisely and well, to represent all members of our community fairly and to make decisions that promote the common good. Thank you. Agenda item D, apologies and leave of absences, we have nil. Agenda item E, condolences and memorials, nil. F, petitions and presentations, nil. Agenda item G is the confirmation of the minutes of the last ordinary meeting of Council on the 20th of August. And I resolve that those minutes of that meeting be confirmed. Agenda item H is the reception and consideration of committee reports, the 5 committee reports. The first one, Economic Development Committee. In that committee, I noted a potential conflict of interest for agenda items 6 and 7, and that was that potential conflict of interest in that these are the Ipswich City Central Program Report and the Ipswich Central Civic Project. The conflict of interest was that I worked for Rainbury Management Group from 2008-2012, who are now one of the current program management partners. But as there was no personal or financial benefit to me, I participated in those committee meetings in relation to those 2 matters.
In relation to items 3 and 4, declare a potential perceived conflict of interest as KPMG, the company that I'm a partner of, was included in the list of procurement approaches for responses to the RFQs. I'm not involved in those particular areas of the firm, and there's no benefit to me to be involved in that, so I can use it in there.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Make some comments in relation to some of the matters that were decided or recommended, I should say, at that committee. Agenda item 1 of that committee was the relationship between Council and the Chambers of Commerce, and it was resolved that the Council became ordinary members of the Chambers of Commerce, but that we would progress towards a new partnership arrangement, and we did have a very, very successful meeting in my view. I think the day or two after, or the same afternoon. Soon thereafter, the committee meetings with the Chambers and talked through, had a workshop, it was the day after, on where we go from here. And that looks very promising in terms of an open, transparent arrangement between the Chambers and ourselves, and treating the Chambers as they are, very important to members of the economic development community of the city. So that'll be brought back to committee and council in terms of a documented memorandum of understanding or some similar kind of arrangement in terms of our ongoing discussions and dialogue with the Chambers. So thank you to the staff who convened and coordinated that too. Agenda item 3, the North Ipswich Reserve business case, which was recommended for approval by that committee. Just a reminder to Council again that the previous Council resolution in regard to that business case was on the basis of a number of preconditions. The Council has in principle committed $10 million towards stage 1 of the redevelopment of the North Ipswich Reserve. And those conditions include the state and the Commonwealth matching that $10 million grant, the state taking on the venues and it being owned and managed and operated by parties other than Council, either an A-League licence or an NRL licence. So there's some pretty high benchmarks, but that's commenced the conversation with the state and federal governments on funding. And the business case provides evidence-based research and which will underpin the advocacy for that funding. Thank you to the staff for that work too. Agenda item 4, the Ipswich to Springfield rail line. Similar comment and thanks to staff. That is an essential bit of work by this council, I think, to commit to an evidence-based strategy for advocacy to the state, particularly in the Commonwealth, for funding for the Springfield to Ipswich rail line. My last comment there is agenda item 8 on the Economic Development Committee, the Advertising and Communication Effectiveness Award, again to formally congratulate the staff in the team for a job well done. Thank you. So on that basis, I'll resolve the minutes of the Economic Development Committee report of 10th of September be received and adopted. Growth and Infrastructure Committee. I did identify in that committee a potential conflict of interest in relation to agenda item 5, which was Strategic Roads Priority List of Projects. And that perceived conflict of interest was I was formerly General Manager of Economic Development Queensland, which is the state government agency responsible for the planning of the Ripley Priority Development Area. And as there was no personal or financial gain to me, I participated in that committee meeting in relation to that matter and the discussions therein. In relation to agenda item 5, I also note that that discussion was really around taking Ripley out of what I called the black hole of infrastructure planning. Merely because it's a priority development area doesn't mean that council should not adequately plan, I think, for the infrastructure within and around and because of that PDA. The matter of funding, which I understand might be a matter of dispute between the council and the state about how that infrastructure is funded, is a separate matter. That's a really important matter that needs to get resolved, but I don't think it's a basis for not planning for the infrastructure. So the decision or the recommendation of council committee was that the full planning of infrastructure, including the PDA, be incorporated into the way that the city plans in the future, and I think that's the appropriate process to go through. Any other comment in relation to agenda item 17, the planning scheme report, and an expression of gratitude again to the staff involved in the preparation of the draft planning scheme, as I've called it, as that progresses on the way through. On that basis, I'll take the Growth and Infrastructure Committee report as received and adopted. Communities Committee report. I'll make a comment about agenda item 2 in that committee, which was the Christmas and festive grants. I think there were about 19 grants recommended for approval by the committee to various Christmas events, and subsequent discussions we've had in presentation to the quarterly CBD retailers, which explained council's role and support for those events and other Christmas and festive season events. I think is an excellent achievement, a big improvement on our performance last year, and I take responsibility for perhaps a less than ideal performance last year. But I think we're back on the path for a very solid Christmas and festive event support program, openly, transparently funded in part funded by the council. So thanks again to the staff. You can interrupt at any time, IMC members too, if you like. On that basis, I'll take the Communities Committee report 10th of September to be received and adopted. Environment Committee report. In relation to agenda item 3, it was about disaster recovery planning. We did make the comment in that committee and reiterate it here to the gratitude to the council staff involved, SES, the police, emergency and fire services for the bushfires that were particularly challenging last week. So thank you again to those folks involved. And I'll take the Environment Committee report 10th of September received and adopted. And the final committee report, governance. This was actually a very significant committee meeting, I think, in the history of this council. Agenda item 4, repealing the former local laws and replacing them with, I think, 8 new local laws. And then progressively repealing a vast number of policies and replacing them with new policies. Another great achievement, I think. And then agenda item 11, the councillor integrity package, a package of 8 new policies, really to assist councillors in the future do their job properly, do their job well, and assist the council to be what it should be in terms of governance. That's a culmination of work that we started a year ago. There's obviously more reform being done in lots of areas, but it was, I think, an excellent committee meeting to be part of. And for those staff, again, involved in that, many thanks for your hard work. I know there are some concerns about one of the amendments that might be needed to one of the policies in the integrity package, councillor integrity packages, but I'm thinking overnight we might just I'm keen to approve that package as a whole, and if we need to come back, as we've said in the past, and amend some policies and get them even better, happy to do that. But rather than pull one out for an amendment in a month, I think I'd prefer to go through and approve that today, and if we need to come back and amend it, we'll do that. So that basis, I'll take the Governance Committee report. Now, I've got 2 amendments to do, haven't I, Vicky?
Yes, there was.
1 amendment to do. Recommending. Thank you. The policy entitled Councillor Staff Interaction Policies, detailed in Attachment 1, be adopted with an amendment to Clause 7 of the policy by the addition to the following paragraph. Where a councillor is appointed to a specific role under an act or regulation, the requirements of that act or regulation will take precedence where they are undertaking the specific responsibilities as defined in the relevant act or regulation in accordance with that role. My recollection is the basis of that addition is really, again, disaster recovery and the ability of a councillor acting in a disaster recovery mode to make expeditious decisions.
Yes.
That was the basis.
And
of that, yeah.
to be the chair of the committee, and it has some executive role.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
the legislation says that the chair must be a councillor.
Yes, that's right. So it's giving the ambit for that councillor to act in that role under the legislation and regulation that applies to the disaster recovery. So with that 1 amendment, I'll take the Governance Committee report, 10th of September, received and adopted. Okay, yeah. Agenda item I, consideration of notified motions, nil. J, reception of motions, notices of motion for future meetings, nil. K, questions? Nil. L, officers' report. We have 2 officers' report to deal with. So in accordance with Section 7 of Subordinate Local Law 2.1 Council meetings, I move that the 2 late officers' reports entitled Quote Consideration Plan, People and Culture Performance Framework, and Ipswich Waste Services Annual Performance Plan 2019-2020 be considered at this meeting. The Quote Consideration Plan, People and Culture Performance has a confidential report attached to that. So I don't intend to discuss that in the open council meeting, but resolve recommendations A to D. I'll read them out. Resolve A, that council resolve to prepare a quote or tender consideration plan for design, development, implementation of both a grievance management framework and a performance system review in accordance with Section 231A of the Local Government Regulation 2012. B, that council resolve to adopt the quote or tender consideration plan for design, development and implementation for both a grievance management framework and a performance system review as outlined in the report by the Learning and Development Advisor dated 12th of September 2019 and in accordance with Section 231B of the Local Government Regulation 2012. C, that council resolve to enter into a contract with Prominence Proprietary Limited for the development of a grievance management framework and for the development of a performance review process on the terms described in the report by the Learning and Development Advisor dated 12th of September 2019. D, that the Chief Executive Officer be authorised to negotiate and finalise the terms of the contract with Prominence Proprietary Limited to be executed by Council and to do any other acts necessary to implement Council's decision in accordance with Section 13(3) of the Local Government Act 2009. Second report, Ipswich Waste Services Annual Performance Review. CEO, do we need to discuss anything aspects there?
Not really. There's only some minor changes to the fundamental performance plan, but the performance plan needs to be adopted prior to the release of our operational plan for the current year.
Okay.
So it's largely the same. I think there's changes in the service for infirm.
Yep.
So it used to be that if you had an infirm person, then we would come in the household, we would come and pick up the bin. Now we need to make sure that there's no one there who is capable of putting the bin out. I think there's a change in the naming of garbage bins to mobile, I can't remember the exact words, but there's some minor changes.
Okay. Yep.
But essentially, it is the same performance plan.
Right.
It's been in operation for several years.
Okay. So on that basis, I'll resolve the 2019-2020 Ipswich Waste Services Annual Performance Plan and its supporting service specification as detailed in attachments 1 and 2 to the report by the Ipswich Waste Services Manager titled Ipswich Waste Services Annual Performance Plan 2019-2020 dated 12th of September 2019 be adopted. Agenda item M, consider items placed on the agenda by Councillor Nill. So I declare on that basis the meeting closed at 9:16 a.m. Thank you.
Beautiful.